In this video, we're going to start to make a second level. So we're starting to move towards having a finish for our level that'll load another one. So we're just going to create a second one so we can load between these two right away. So first, I'm just going to clean up this level a little here. I actually want to move the water down a little bit lower here. So I'm just going to use the eraser tool, make sure I'm on water layer. I'm going to delete a bunch of these. And one thing I want to show while I'm doing this, we don't have to modify or do any updates to our tile map collider for water. Now that we have this set up, as we start modifying our tiles that are on that layer, this collider is going to update automatically. So if we look at this here, watch what's going to happen. I'm going to erase it just off the screen. And if we turn off the tile map renderer, notice that's now our collider. So that's another reason this is very easy, because once you have it created, you don't have to go back and modify your colliders or change the shape. Unity is going to do all of that for you. Okay, so I'm just going to make my water very low here. So we're going to see, that's the first one. So I'm just going to make it the first layer on the bottom of the camera. And this is something we're going to finesse later, but I just wanted a bit lower as it was bugging me right now. So we have that. We'll add it below. Okay, so that looks a bit better. I'm going to put a bit on this edge. But right now I'm not too worried about how things look visually. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control S, save this scene. And now what I'm going to do is everything that's set up in this level, I already like the way this is laid out. I have my tile maps here. I have my light set up. I have my camera. So what I'm going to do, instead of starting a new level from complete scratch, I'm going to rename this current scene. So the one we're in is called Game. I'm going to call this level 01. Let's put an underscore even. Okay, so this is level 01. What I'm going to do is select it, hit Control D to duplicate. I'm just going to rename it level 02. So now if I go into level 02, it currently looks the exact same. But now I can just modify this one. So if you had a full level, it'd be a bit more of a hassle. You'd have to go through and start deleting everything and, you know, redoing your entire level. But when we have something this small, it's pretty quick and easy. So I'm just going to erase this water quick. And now we have the same background set up. Later we could change the background out on this one, but for now we can just make a level that looks different. So I'm just going to select the ground tile map layer. I'll select one of these in the eraser. I'm just going to erase these platforms too. Okay, so I basically have a completely empty level now. If I wanted, I could even save this. And you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm just going to go to File, Save As. I'm just going to call this, I'll go to the Scenes folder, and maybe I'll just call this Empty Level. Okay, now I don't want to modify this one. Let's go back to level 02. So now we have this blank canvas of a level. What I would suggest is you try to build your own level. You could use a different style from the asset pack here. So if we go to ground, we have all these different ones. Try something different so you can set it up from the start and then add that into your project. So if you want, you can follow along with me right away, but I highly suggest going through and making your own level. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this dirt pack. Now it's basically the same thing as this, just different sprites. So it's in a different style. I could add them into this palette, but just for practice, I'm going to create a whole separate one. I'll call this Dirt Platforms palette. I'm going to go and save this in the tiles folder. I'll make a new folder for this one. So I'll call this one Dirt Platforms. I'll save it in here. Now I have to change all the pixels per unit to match, so I'm going to select them all, set it to 128, hit apply. Okay, and now I can drag all of these in. Again, I'm going to select our tiles folder, Dirt Platforms. Okay, so now we have all these. For the sake of this video, I'm not going to modify the position of them in here. I'm just going to leave it as is. And I'm going to leave the water layer. I don't know if I'm going to use water yet, but for right now, I'm going to work on the ground tile map. And I'm just going to start drawing something in. So maybe I'll make one platform here. Make this a bigger one. Looks like I'm actually using the wrong one here. Those don't fully join. That looks better. Okay, we'll put an end cap. Make a couple of little platforms here, like a step up we have to climb. Make some spaces we have to jump. And then I'll make an end platform over here. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to take our prefab. So the style is not going to match, but for right now, I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to put our moving platform in here. And now the collider doesn't match because we changed the pivot of where it is. So I can modify that. If we go into it, there we have the box collider. We can just hit edit collider and we can adjust this. So if you remember when we fixed our sprites to work with tile map, we had to change the pivot position, and that's why that collider went out. Okay, so now we have that. And if we look at our ground tile map, it already takes care of all the colliders for us because we did that with our basic setup when we duplicated the scene. So we should be basically good to go, other than we need to find our player spawn position and just set it somewhere over here. Now let's run this to test it out. Okay, so we're a bit off camera. So I'm going to move the spawn position up a bit. I'll select the ground platform. Okay, so I'm just going to select the select tool, select all of these, hit move. I'm just going to move it up. Yeah, that's good. We're going to start right on the bottom. So let's try this out now. Our spawn position was a little off, so I'm just going to move that up a tiny bit here. And we're going to correct all of that later to look smoother. Okay, so there we go. We have our little platforms and we have to jump between them. And if we fall off, we're going to respawn. And we have our moving platform over here. Okay, so I'm just going to add one more platform on the edge here. And this is just so we have something where we can put an end of the level when we get to it. Okay, so let's add one last platform here. I'll add this little spiky one. And this is where our end of level is going to be. Okay, and don't worry about this error message right now. We're going to actually rework this moving platform very soon and make it a lot more efficient. Okay, so right now we have two levels. and then we're going to learn how to navigate between them in your game. See you in the next video. Now that we have multiple levels created, let's find out how we can put a finish line or an end to our level and tell it to load another scene. So if we go back to scenes, we have level 1 and level 2. So I'm just going to go into level 1. I'm just going to quickly make a few platforms here just so the level's a little bit longer. So I'll make sure I'm on my ground tile map. And we'll just add a couple here. Okay, so I'm going to make the finish somewhere over here. So the first thing we have to do is we have to put something in the level that's going to act as the finish. Now this can be anything you want. I'm just going to use this little sign I found in the Kenny pack. So if I go down to our Kenny Platformer Redux in tiles, we go down, there's a few signs. There's one that says exit. So I'm going to use this one as the level exit. So I'm just going to drag it into the scene. I'm just going to move it right over to the end here. Now for the sorting layer, I don't really have anything specific for stuff like this, so I'm going to make another sorting layer, and I'm just going to call it items. And this is just going to be for things that are in the world, so things like the exit sign or maybe our little flagpoles for the checkpoints and things like that. So I'm going to set the sorting layer to be items, and I'm actually just going to go back here. And I'm just going to make this below the player. So I want the player to run in front of the sign, not behind it. So the player is going to be on top of everything, but items will be the next one. And now before I get too far, I'm just going to make this into a prefab. So I'm just going to call this level exit. I'm going to make it into a prefab. And now we need to add a collider onto it. So I'm just going to open up the prefab in edit mode here. I'm going to add a box collider 2D. Okay, and that size looks fine, and I'm going to make it a trigger. Now I also want to give it a tag so we know how to find this. So I'm just going to call it, let's just go with exit. Okay, now we got to assign the tag. So we have exit. Okay, so that should be set up in our prefab. And since we did it in edit mode of the prefab by clicking this arrow, if we look, there's no overrides because it already applied it all. Now we got to start writing our code. So there's quite a few ways we could do this. We could do a check on our player controller if we hit the exit, and then we could do something like call the game manager and tell it to load a scene. Or we could add a script right onto it here, and on this script we could check if we collide with the player and then tell it to load a level. So it really depends on the game and how we want to handle it here. So the way I'm going to approach it is because we will want to add something that allows the player to exit the game anytime they want, which will make it have to go back to a main menu scene. So there's going to be different options of scenes loading in this game. So in that case, I want to do it all in one spot. So I'm just going to do it in the game manager. So what I'm going to do is put a separate script on this level exit. So I'm going to add a script, and I'm just going to call it level exit. So if we go into this script, what we need to do here is check if the player hit it. So we don't need start or update in here. Since this is a trigger, we're going to use on trigger enter 2D. And then if you remember from our other ones, we could check, say, the player controller. We have it here where we want to check the collision that we hit. We want to find its game object and compare the tag to see if it's this. So we're going to do that here. We're going to do if collision.gameObject.compare tag. And the tag we want to check is level, or remember we just called it exit. And this string has to be exact. for now, we could just make sure it's working. Let's just debug log and let's say load next level. Okay, so let's make sure this works. Let's open our console. We'll run the game. Let's go hit this. And it does not work. And this is very obvious. I made this mistake. I put the tag of exit. We're already the exit. We need to check for the player. So let's try that one more time. There. So now we told it to load the next level once we hit that. So that part is working. Now we have to actually do the level load. So the first step we need to do here is we need to know what level we want to load. So I'm going to make a serialized field variable. It's going to be of type string. I'm just going to call this level name to load. So now if we go in the inspector, we see we have this text field to type in. So if we look at our scenes folder, we can use the exact spelling of any scene and tell it what we want to load. So again, it's a string, so this has to be exactly spelt. And you could actually slow click on it to copy, and then we could paste that in. So now we type in which level we want to load. That way we can use the same prefab in any level, and we just type in the level name we want to load. So now we have to look back. Let's go to our camera controller here. We could see to get access to the game manager, we did find object of type game manager, and then we could run public methods on it. So we're going to need to do that again. So inside game manager, let's make another public method, and let's call this load level. And we need to put a return type, so it's void. So now when we call this, we need a way to pass in that level name. So we have to take that in here. Just like we took a transform here, we can take a string here, and we can just call this, we can just call it name. So now in level exit, we want to do find object of type game manager dot load level, and then we want to pass in the level to load, so level name to load. Okay, so now this is going to call it. Now we haven't covered how to load a level yet. So to do this, if we look at the top of our script, we have a few using statements here. Now what these do is these include code into our script that Unity has built in. These are called namespaces. And basically what it is a group of code. So for example here, this using Unity engine, this is where we get all of the different variables we have here, like game object, transform, things like start and update. Those aren't just built into C#. That's actually part of Unity. So if you were trying to program and you weren't in Unity and you tried to do something like game object or transform, it wouldn't exist. All of these are part of this Unity engine up here. And now there's lots of different libraries like this. We don't add them all in here because it would take up so much wasted space. So we only add them when we need them. So when it comes to starting to load levels, we have another one we can use. So we have to use using Unity engine.scene management. And anything to do with loading scenes or checking if a scene was loaded is all part of this scene management. So now that we have that here, if we go down to load level, we have access to something called scene manager. And you can see it auto-completing it turned green. But if I delete that, I'm just going to comment out this using line. Now if I try to type scene manager, notice it doesn't exist. So just remember, if you need to start using anything to do with scenes, you need to put using Unity engine.scene management. And this is a very common one you're going to use in all of your games. So you're going to remember this one pretty quick. Okay, so now we can do scene manager.load scene. And we just tell it what scene we want. So in here, we can just type in name. So now there's one more thing we have to do before we start loading these scenes. We have to tell our game that those scenes belong to it. So if we go up to the File menu, we have Build Settings. If we click on this one, this is where it gives the options of how we create our game to actually run it. And you can see at the top here, we have Scenes in Build. So what this allows us to do is we could make a whole pile of scenes in our project, but they're not going to be included in the final complete game unless we tell it to include them. So you can see here right now, Scenes in Build, all we have is Sandbox. We could just click and drag our scenes in here. So now we have scene level 1 and 2. I'm actually going to uncheck the sandbox. I don't need that one. And you can see now, look on the left, we have this number. This is what's called the build index. So it's always going to go sequentially in order of the scenes here. If I uncheck sandbox, notice it changes now. Level 1 is 0. Level 02 is 1. So now this is telling it to include both of these scenes in our game. Without this, we can't load the scene because Unity doesn't know it's there. Now, one thing to note with that build index, when we're working with load scene here, you can see we do have the option where we could just type in the build index number. So if we did load scene and I put 0, what this means is when that code runs, it's going to load the scene with index 0, which is going to be level 01. So this is a way you can code your level names automatically that we don't have to type them like this. But that's a little bit more complex, so we don't want to do that now. I just want you to know that it exists where you could just load by number here. Okay, so let's change that back to just be name. So a quick summary before we test this out is on our exit, we have a level exit script. We tell it what level name to load. Then in our code, when it hits, it's going to find the game manager, tell it to load level with that name. And then the game manager is going to call scene manager with that scene. So it's a couple steps to make this happen, but this is the important part right here. This is what actually loads our scene. Scene manager.load scene. So let's go test this out and make sure it's working. Okay, and there we go. So we loaded the next scene. So now for practice, what I would recommend is, I'm going to show you how to do it right away, but try to do it for the second level on your own. So make the second level load the first level again. That way you have a bit of an endless loop. If you finish level 1, it goes to level 2. If you finish level 2, it goes back to level 1. Okay, so I'm just going to add it to mine now. So I'm just going to double check my level exit prefab. I do have an override that I added the script, so I need to apply that. Now if I go to level 2, yes, I want to save this scene. Okay, so on this platform, I'm going to go to my prefabs folder. I'm going to drag in my level exit. Okay, and on this one, I just have to adjust the light. So I have to add the items layer. Now on level exit, I want it to load level 01. Okay, so if I play this now, both scenes should go back and forth. So I'm on level 2 right now. I go to level 1. Now if I complete level 1, I go to level 2. Okay, and I got an error from my camera controller, so let's take a look and see what that is. It's telling me the player has not been assigned. So if we go and look at our camera controller, notice we find our player at the start of the game. And in this case, when the level loaded, it didn't find it. Now, this is actually going to be something we haven't talked about yet. So I'm going to cover this in the next video. If you had this same issue happen, you're going to see how to fix this right away.